Welcome to the One Within All, back to another episode of Interverse. It's me, your host, Chance. And today we are talking with Dan Shukis from the Cosmic Keys podcast. Dan's the man. And I've had a recent conversation with him on his show that may be out by the time this one comes out, roughly soonish. So go give them a sub. And I say them, they used to have co-hosts, but
I still say we a lot.
I say we about myself sometimes. It's weird. But yeah, it's just Dan now, which is cool because he gets to forge his own path. And, maybe we'll talk about that a little bit. It came up in our conversation on Cosmic Keys. He told me a little bit about what that's like. Flying solo, I can relate in many ways. Really, even with podcasting, I used to try to have a co-host way back in the day. But so anyway, Cosmic Keys is a show that it blends occult ideas, magical concepts, critical thinking, and looking at current events, all with a really deep knowledge of the sky clock and other spiritual modalities and practices and ways of knowing and being. So astrology is going to be on the menu for this conversation today, especially interested to pick Dan's brain about the Great Conjunction. It's like less than a month away, and a lot of weird stuff happens when great conjunctions are in a year. And we'll talk about that, maybe get a little bit of a 2021 astro forecast or whatever type of astro info that Dan's got on his mind right now. But we're just going to roll with it. So make sure you give Dan a sub over at Cosmic Keys. We're also both on the fringe.fm, which is pretty sweet. You can go see a lot of neat, interesting, deep, esoteric, magical shows there too. So yeah, follow him on Instagram as well. That's another good place to follow Dan. He puts up great astro updates there that you can get in little bite-sized chunks. And yeah, so we're ready to get this party started. Dan, welcome back to the show. Good to have you here, bro.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me back, Chance. It's great to be here. And thanks for that great intro too. I'm not used to being introduced, so it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've been doing this new thing where I do the intros completely off the top of my head, and my wordplay is downgraded, but my stress level of feeling like I need to prepare something really amazing and perfect is way down. So maybe I'll meet somewhere in the middle in the future.
Yeah, well, that was a good improv. Well done.
Thank you. I actually was in improv speech in junior high. I crushed it.
Is that's like improv comedy style or like improv theater style?
I mean, it's 8th grade, so it's not too serious, but they would just be like, okay, your topic is grass. You need to talk for 5 minutes about grass. Give a good speech. And they judge you kind of on it's sort of like writing the essay, intro, body paragraph, outro. And they're just like, how well did you put this together? It doesn't matter how much BS it is. But wow, what a weird tangent. Now you guys know why I do what I do. I just love to make shit up off the top of my head and ramble.
Hey, it's a good skill to have, especially in media. So there you go.
Yeah, but dude, this is about you. We're going to talk about you. How have you been? Like, what's on your mind these days? What's new? Any of that?
That's a good question. When I talk to people, like I moved from Chicago to Colorado, and I'm coming up on a year of being in Colorado. And I live in Breckenridge, which is like a ski town, tourist town. So we were hit really hard by the lockdowns. I lost my job in the spring when they did the first lockdown, and then it's been kind of crazy ever since. So yeah, it's been stressful. But when I talk to my friends in Chicago who have it so much worse and it's even more oppressive there, I'm at the end of the day, I keep saying I can't complain. So yeah, things aren't perfect, but I'm still really grateful for where I'm at, I guess. But yeah, it's hard because there's a lot of, I'm not as I don't feel good about what I see in the mainstream or just in the grocery store. And that can be a bummer, but I feel lucky, and I'm trying to stay as positive as possible while still being open to the reality that so much fuckery is going on this year.
Yeah, that's really the name of the year. It's just fuckery 2020.
Yeah.
It's harsh. It's harsh out there to like be in a zombie apocalypse. Everyone with their corporate veil covering their divine spirit. I mean, the breath is the spirit. That's what we're covering here. And we're in this weird infopocalypse where it no longer matters if you can actually find supporting evidence that's quote unquote scientific to explain why you think what you think, because everyone else has got whatever they need for ammunition, or they just don't care. And so there's like conflicting data, and just mainly though, just like deep apathy and attachment to the identity side of politics. And that has radicalized things way faster than I ever thought could happen in this country. But here we are.
Yeah, it's definitely like psychological, and I'd consider it big picture social engineering and psychological warfare. And it's just really bizarre because it is a year where like all the conspiracies came true, and still when you see people that are really blue pilled about this, it's just like when I'm talking to people that are like that, I'm just like, it's like staring into a void when I'm talking to them sometimes, just because like reality, we're living in two different realities. One where you're kind of red pilled, quote unquote, or where I'd say you're blue pilled. And that's, I mean, let's be real. In terms of like partisan politics, it is kind of in alignment with like the Republican Democrat duality, which I never would expect. And I don't like it at all. But, you know, it's just weird how like the red pill phrasing from that movie, The Matrix, it's really ringing true. And it's like, you realize how many people would take the blue pill openly. And I think everybody that is sort of like, just give me the vaccine, just wear the mask, just comply, that is like a blue pill. I'm sorry. Like it's going along with the narrative to make it easier on yourself to deal with, but I'd rather deal with the truth and what's really going on. So it's hard.
With eyes unclouded by fear would be the best possible way to look at things. And yeah, believing the narrative, the blue pill, the blue states, they seem to go hand in hand, the blue regions and the blue pilling. It's kind of, I mean, there's a reason for that. And I find that interesting. I believe that both parties are, you know, obviously have two wings of the same bird. We're not going to solve anything by deciding, me and you, like, well, we're going to be Republicans now. Ironic. I found out that the Republican Party is actually a member of the International Democratic, what is it? Some association of some kind, like of various parties of different nations that are like more center or left than anything. And so anyway, Republicans are Democrats, Democrats are Republicans. But in terms of the narrative of the red versus blue in like this election year, it's interesting because blue is representative of the feminine, which in the esoteric, this has nothing to do with men and women, but in the esoteric, the idea of femininity is receptivity and passivity, whereas the red side, the masculine side, is active, acting out into the world, you know, acting your will upon the world. Whereas that this really is the difference here, is like the blue pill narrative here is the thing that like the people that are super, I wouldn't say anyone's super pro Biden, but the people that are super anti-Trump and therefore accept Biden somehow as like, somehow that's better. They are also, they're like receiving, you know, the propaganda. They're the receptive side. They've been feminized. And I don't mean that like as in femininity is a bad thing. We all have masculine and feminine sides, but if you're just completely polarized into being totally feminized, that means you're sort of moldable, controllable. And anyway, I look at the Republican and Democrat parties as like, the Democrats are the ones with mommy abandonment issues, and they want like a nurturer, care for you, tell you everything you need to do, dress you, you know. And then the Republican side, they have like the daddy abandonment issues. So they just want a protector, but also someone who stays out of their business. They want justice or whatever that they see it as. Like it kind of looks more like vengeance a lot of the times. But anyway, this is kind of where we're at. People are tending towards being more hyper feminized in their consciousness. Again, nothing to do with men and women, everything to do with the esoteric idea of being imbalanced towards passivity and moldability.
Yeah, I think you're right that things are like, there is sort of a war on masculinity, unfortunately, and it's directly related to Marxism. I mean, like, all of these things their root is really in critical theory, and the cultural Marxism that you see with like all this woke stuff. Like, I understand the appeal and I understand the arguments and I understand the worldview, but I just don't think it's I think it's a false reality, and it's like a false reality cult. And they're all very cultish in their idea of like purity, or their idea of morality and justice and virtue signaling, and all that stuff is all related. And I mean, it was created in the 1940s by Marxists, and they brought it through the universities. It got popularized by the really radical professors in like the 70s and 80s, and then the millennials were all taught by these people. And like, I have a liberal arts degree. I studied that stuff, quote unquote, and was good at it. Like, I remember the first time I wrote a good essay about like the proletariat and like how the ruling class is so evil was when I was in high school. And it's like, well, yeah, I was not in the real world at that point. I was a child, basically. And yet high schoolers make great Marxists because of that reason. It's all theoretical. It's all ideas. But now that we're facing like a massive loss of liberty with this virus situation, all those socialist and Marxist brigades are kind of like getting more popular, and their ideas are spreading more as a way to kind of compensate for all this chaos that this virus brought, I guess. So yeah, it's definitely, if you're kind of more libertarian leaning, these are kind of scary times, I would say.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's like it was going to happen somehow, some way, at some point. What the government is going to just keep, like, there's no giving back what government takes. We can look at where the country has gone since its inception and just know that, well, maybe we would stave it off and like not lose so many liberties so fast. But it seems like it's all ramping up in lockstep with the technological drip feed that we get of supposedly like empowering new technologies that seem to chain us to them more and more, and even restrict what we're able to do. I mean, I've been thinking, like, if digital currency becomes the only way that you can buy, sell, or trade, you must have the mark. What are the Amish going to do about, getting provisions that they can't get inside their communities, or Mennonites, people like that, who probably, they don't get birth certificates, but they still have to deal with cash to some degree, I would think, somewhere in their existence. And like, is that just going to be no longer an option for them, for people like that? Is that the end game, to lock everything into the cloud? Like, I see this, maybe you have thoughts on this, but I see it all as very Age of Aquarius, dark side of the Age of Aquarius stuff. Like, even the fact that these ideologies that people can only support conceptually, because as soon as you bring their attention to any real world examples of these ideologies in play with Marxism, socialism, things like that, I mean, heads are rolling. Like, it's not a joke. This is a demonic thing. I mean, it is a plague on Earth for the last 100 years. So many have died, but it's all like just in the air. It's just in the mind, as far as what drives people to follow these type of belief systems. It's mental constructs, which is very Age of Aquarius. And even in this virus thing, Saturn's been in Aquarius at this point a lot this year, even retrograded, I think, at one point. And So that even sort of fits the idea of some invisible malefic thing in the air that is, plaguing us, so to speak. That's a very Saturn and Aquarius type of thing, if you catch my drift.
Yeah, I totally agree. And with everything you were saying, it made me think too of, the age of Aquarius. And when you were talking about the way in which like communism has murdered so many millions of people during the 20th century and into the 21st century. And, when you were talking about digital currency and being like having the mark of the beast and stuff, like a part of me, I agree that I think that is like the dark side of the sign of Aquarius, but I think Aquarian themes are inevitable. So I am trying to rethink what that could look like in a positive way that honors liberty and sovereignty. Because that's the weird thing about the sign of Aquarius is it's like, a generic profile of an Aquarian is like, they are so unique and one of a kind. But the themes of the sign are, we're all in this together. And, it's weird because I've rolled with real lefty people, like leftists, who are like socialists, Marxists, whatever. And I don't think they always have bad intentions. Like people that are into that, if you're in like the DIY art world, they are about communal living. And that's cool. That's like kind of boots on the ground, grassroots, collaboration and, pooling of resources and like living easily. So, and there are plenty of critiques of like the capitalist after effects, but the basic idea of like controlling capitalism so that the state controls all the resources. First of all, that comes from like such a different era when Karl Marx was around. And to bring into the astrological themes, and I know you wanted to talk about the grand conjunction between like Saturn and Jupiter that's happening this December. We're entering a 200-year cycle where the conjunctions are going to take place all in air signs. The previous 200 years, they were all taking place in earth signs. And the go-to way of explaining that for astrologers is like, this was the industrial era where physical things were being manufactured and shipped and moved around, and we were digging into the earth. This next era is going to be digital, or at least information-based or intellect-based, because the air element rules that. And people are like, there is going to, the basic theme of Aquarius is you as the unique individual connected to and in a piece of the larger whole. So that's not all negative. It's negative when you use the old paradigm system of communism or socialism or anything like that, where if you don't consent to it, you're literally killed or put in a gulag or whatever. But the thing I'm thinking with this inevitable shift towards more tech and more kind of collectivism in a way is like when I was talking about these DIY arts people forming little like communes and stuff, I think people can bring the collectivist or communal goal and use technology to live really alternative communal lifestyles in a way, but they have to you have to consent to that. It can't be because you were born in this country, like say if you were born in China, you're part of that gridlock system, whether you like it or not. But I think a better version of the Aquarian paradigm could be people having the resources to like connect with others or virtually connect or network. Because even what we're doing right now with this conversation, the only reason we can have it is because of these technologies like this cool StreamYard site that you're using instead of Zoom. But like the video chatting, the podcasting thing is super Aquarian in my opinion too. And even me and you, we're like kindred spirits and we're connecting over the internet. That's a good thing, I think. And the sharing of information is a good thing. But so yeah, I don't think it should, I don't want to be Amish, like not using the internet, not using technology, but I do want to push for like alternative systems that have nothing to do with government or so I want to have like a libertarian kind of techno like communalism that's consensual, that you can choose your tribe or you can choose, who you want to pool resources with, so you don't have to be a 9-to-5 slave and you can live a more free life through the connections. But that just kind of popped in my head as you were talking. So it's kind of a new idea, but yeah, I have been thinking about, it's okay if you want to be a leftist. It's okay if you think that like communalism is better, but you have to form alternative groups or alternative systems that have nothing to do with nations or government, and use technology and money and possibly like cryptocurrency and stuff to, have that goal where nobody is left behind, where poverty can be kind of eliminated. But if you think that you can just do it by citizenship and stuff like that and governments, well, not everybody's going to agree with it. And people like me and probably people like you aren't going to stand for stuff like that. Like they gridlock you into their system, where I think the positive side of Aquarius could be forming alternative independent systems that have that kind of larger goal of, not leaving anyone behind, not letting people starve, but also not stealing resources from people who don't necessarily agree with you. So yeah.
All right. Well, man, this gives me a lot to think about, but I find it interesting that the conjunctions, I'll just start here, have this pattern of 200 years in an earth sign, 200 years in an air sign. And in the last 200 years, what happened to the earth was that somebody laid claim to every damn inch of it, basically. Mm-hmm. A nation has claim to every part of the earth. So I agree that things like we need to do things from a voluntary standpoint. In fact, I also agree with you that the intentions of most people that are extreme leftists, their heart is in the right place. I think there's a few really weird issues that completely counter other stances that the left has. Like, I don't know, I won't go there, but there's certain keystone issues that I just can't believe that anybody supports that are popular with people on the left. Just leave it at that. And the other problem that I have with, really at this point, as weird as it is to have to say this out loud, but I mostly would rather be in communication with people that kind of lean right, at least online. In real life, people I'm friends with already, and we don't need to have any kind of conversations about things we disagree about. That's another story. But man, online, I just see so much more vitriol from people that hate the orange man than I see a lot of, not to say that there aren't people on the right that aren't throwing poop. I'm sure that there are a lot. I've seen some of that too. There's some very weird Nazi level alt-right stuff that I guess does exist as well. But my point is that there's just like this weird militant hypocrisy about the left, where if they are supposed to be so all-inclusive and accepting of everyone, how come it's okay to like hate the guts of certain groups of people, but that you're all about protecting, minorities and the underrepresented? So we're going to do that by shouting down other viewpoints and not allowing them to even speak. That's kind of what I see. It's just a lot of la fingers in your ears, like shouting the same rhetoric, calling the other and accusing them of being just as close-minded as you're being. So both sides, quit doing that shit. Actually, just stop identifying with the party. That would probably be for the best. But it was so, okay, to go back to this like Saturn conjunction with Jupiter thing. Saturn is like discipline and time and order and rulership, and Jupiter being expansion and abundance and sort of like just, I don't know, in a way, like a lot of freedom elements relate to Jupiter because it's kind of like, it's got the sovereignty thing to it. But in those two things working together, like in this climate that we're moving into, in the space weather, if you will, the other aspect of Aquarius has this freedom thing to it as well. It's like, it's even been tied to Uranus since that planet was discovered. And they're giving Uranus these qualities of being like all about freedom and what kind of freedom are we going to be looking for? Basically, I see, like you're saying, you can look for the positive elements of the Aquarian age or the negative. I look kind of at both. And the positive side is that maybe we can do this communal thing and have freedom to the best of our ability. I mean, unless governments completely go away, we'll still have to figure out a way to be allowed to be on any particular land. I mean, that's how you know shit is in a really bad state. That like, if you wanted to revoke your citizenship and not be a part of any government and just be like, all right, I'm just a human being living on Earth, I'm not part of any of these other things. Well, where are you going to go that you're not in some jurisdiction? And there it is. Like, there is no full freedom from this stuff right now. But the freedom, the negative side of freedom in this Aquarian age is like, do you want to just have the freedom to have no personal responsibility? Because that's what you'll get with the full on total left version of society, which is at that point, the full on extreme left is the same as the full on extreme right. They both end up in totalitarianism, forms of dictatorship, forms of external control, and loss of personal sovereignty and freedom. So are you going to get freedom from personal responsibility, freedom from freedom? Is that what you're asking for? Or are you going to try to build some other, use what voluntary capacity you have to build something else? And I always say that if we really did build communities that were thriving and functioning without a lot of the trappings of the current system, you know, like you help a guy build his barn and he gives you some produce and no one can tax that. That's, to me, that's how we win, because even some hard-hearted people and some jackbooted thugs might see that alternative way of living and go, you know what? That looks better. I think I'd rather do that. I don't think I want to play Monopoly anymore. I think I want to return to reality. And that's what I'm hoping for, is like that people don't, I know that probably the masses are still going to do this because that's just like the weird nature of crowd psychology. But I really hope a lot of people wake up to the fact that the real freedom that they've been chasing is freedom from responsibility, freedom from choice, deference to authority, the dark side of Saturn. That's it, man. Like that's what we need to find in ourselves. It's like, where are we trying to shirk that?
Yeah, it's if we're keeping it under the umbrella of Aquarius themes. I mean, even you brought up Uranus as being a modern ruler of Aquarius. Well, the traditional ruler is Saturn, and those two planets are pretty damn different. I mean, Saturn is about control, restriction, slowing you down. It's a malefic planet. It's not, I mean, it's all about long-term growth and evolution, but like in a difficult way where you're kind of bound by time and bound through Saturn in general, where Uranus is like Prometheus. It's like the spark, the explosion, the rebel that wants nothing but independence. And that's a paradox. The fact that today we don't know if the ruler of Aquarius is tyrannical Saturn or rebellious Uranus. And even just the sign Aquarius, like people think it's a water sign, but it's an air sign. So that's kind of a contradiction. It shows a man pouring a vase of water when in the ancient world, being a water bearer was a female responsibility. So it's this like quirky, strange, fixed air energy that is very paradoxical. So that's something we just have to get used to, that we're going to be living amongst all these paradoxes for the next aeon or whatever. But, and I'm not saying the age of Aquarius is like going to start during the Great Conjunction, but it is significant. It is a significant, milestone on the way there. But, and to bring it back to Saturn and Uranus, right after the Great Conjunction happens on the winter solstice this next December, once Saturn is in that sign, Saturn is going to square off with Aquarius. Or I'm sorry, it's Saturn in Aquarius is going to square off with Uranus in Taurus. So like, it's kind of like, yeah, we're entering this new phase, which is technically a 200-year long count kind of cycle of these conjunctions that happen every 20 years. But then right when Saturn gets into that zone with Jupiter, they're both going to square off with Uranus in the Earth sign of Taurus. And when I first learned about that during the quarantine and stuff, I mean, first of all, we did get a taste of Saturn in Aquarius last spring. And that's really when everything was on Zoom, everything was virtual. People acted like they could just do things digitally and it would be equally as valuable as doing them in person in the flesh. And it was that period, in this spring was when the idea of social distancing came about. And I just have the sense that in 2021, that Uranian energy is going to really clash with the Saturnian control that is taking place in Aquarius. So if it's like this tech control thing, in an air sign of technology and information and data, and in this area of technology and information and data, Saturn, the tyrant, is going to try to control and bind everything in that zone, where the revolutionary spirit of Uranus is in an earth sign, Taurus. So I'm picturing this as, and the Uranus and Taurus thing is like an 8-year mini era in itself. So even after it stops squaring with Saturn, Uranus passing through the sign of Taurus is this like green, earthy, revolutionary spirit. So I'm seeing that 2021 as being like the clampdown in the digital sphere being challenged by this earth-based revolutionary spirit, which I think is going to be people like being off the grid, kind of like, I don't know if it's literally off the grid, but people that are more focused on earth and on their physical life that has sovereignty versus this digital life, which is completely tyrannical under the forces of Saturn. And they're going to square throughout the year. And these squares aren't fun to deal with. When they're the far out planets, I mean, it takes Saturn like 3 years almost to move through each sign. And it takes Uranus like 8 years. When they finally like align, there are big things that happen in the world. So yeah, 2021, I'm seeing as some kind of clash between the technocrats and these off the grid, earth-based rebels somehow. So,
yeah, well, it seems like if I was writing the movie and I wanted it to make sense, I would be like, okay, this is what happens next in the movie. You have all these people that want their freedom, so they realize that the key to doing that is to return to earth-based things. And they do it it's not just an earth sign, it's Taurus, which means it's like, I'm fucking determined. I'm doing this. Like, you won't stop me from doing this. And that's where I don't know how or where I'm going to start, but that's what my 2021 looks like. I'm quitting my job. If I have to like not have the house I live in anymore, I'm not going to have the house anymore. If I have to go live on a friend's farm and like, I don't know, use internet cafes or like park outside of, who knows what I'm going to have to do. But like I'm ready to rebel big time. Like I'm ready to give up the false survival drip feed of money of a regular gig. As good as, I mean, and I have it good with my daily gig compared to some people. Work for my parents. I make enough to be comfortable and eat healthy food, and like, man, so all this is scary stuff to jump out of. But I think the key to understanding the Saturn dynamic is always going to be that as the boundary setter, as the restrictor, constrictor, if you will, what Saturn contracts things. So if you don't want to be in a contract with Saturn where you're getting the losing end of the deal, then you have to write your own contracts. That is, you have to set your own boundaries. I think that disciplinarian aspect of Saturn grants, I mean, I'm not saying that literally there's some like, I am Saturn and I am granting you this, but like that part of ourself grants us the feeling of empowerment and the feeling of freedom, because that's actually what we're missing. The whole time we've always had the ability to choose anything we want. That's the real trip. Like we never didn't have that. But whenever we are good at setting our own boundaries and creating our own containers for our energy that's going to like reward us back, like working with the earth, we're putting our energy into a container that's going to multiply that energy and return it to us later. But it's going to take discipline. It's going to require, like, you might not be able to do something else if you're going to have a garden. I learned that when I've tried to have a garden and tried to do other things, the garden would go to the wayside. But I think this is like the key. If we want to be that Uranian Taurus, return to the earth, stand our ground, no vaccine for me, please. That type of spirit in the next upcoming year, we're going to have to be our own disciplinarian, or we're going to get, we're going to get the belt from the external disciplinarians. I really think, I mean, I hear it right now. Like when I see what's going on with, Biden being elected by the media. Obviously, he hasn't been actually elected, but the media has elected him. That to me, that sounds like when like some drunk dad takes off his belt and he's just snapping it. And he's just like, it's coming. That's really what it feels like. When I see these creeps, pop up in my news feeds and stuff, or if I'm somewhere where there's a TV on in the background and I'm just like, man, this is the reality funnel that most people are keyed into. So yeah, I really like this idea of this squaring. I didn't know about this, and it actually kind of gives me some hope that's where that rebellious part of ourself is going to be rooting itself in the upcoming, cosmic configuration of fractal energy that we are a part of in this big soup.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, even just with Uranus and Taurus, and this is just my interpretation. I'm literally just kind of like speculating, but if Uranus and Taurus does mean sort of like an earth-based, off-the-grid type rebellion where you gain your own sovereignty of your food, your money systems, because Taurus is related to money. If it was Saturn in Taurus, it would be all these constrictions on money and food and all these things. But this is Uranus in Taurus for 8 years. And that's revolutionizing the way we think about it and dismantling the systems, the Saturnian systems, really. And, with the square happening between Taurus, the Uranus and Taurus and the Saturn and Aquarius, you're going to have to think, like, if you are that much of a rebel where you don't take the shot or whatever, well, then maybe you can't shop at a grocery anymore. Maybe that you won't be able to travel abroad. There are going to be more restrictions. And then it's going to be like, okay, well, if you're doing this Taurus Uranian rebel life, you're going to have to think about how you manage physical resources. You're going to have to think about land and, transportation or energy or money or food or anything. So that's a challenge, but the norm is to be in this gridlocked, big agro food industry where we go to grocery stores and we just live a normal life. Well, if you're excluded from society because you won't take a vaccine, you're going to have to learn how to feed yourself and keep your body nourished and stay alive. And who knows if it's going to play out that way with the astrology, but the general themes are revolution in the earth space of Taurus and constriction in the techno collectivist space of Aquarius. And the planets that are positioned in those areas make a 90-degree square to each other and clash. So we cannot, and it has that. I mean, the Mars retrograde and stationing direct definitely had these like civil war vibes, these war vibes. And Mars still hasn't made its final squares with Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. And it won't leave Aries until January, I think. So there's like room for conflict. But I think in 2021, there's going to be room for revolution or rebellion. And who knows if that's going to be pretty or not, because there's been bad revolutions in the past. But if we focus on the Taurus theme of the space that's housing the revolution and the Aquarian space as the space that's under tyrannical control and structurizing by Saturn, and the two being at odds with each other, I'm just picturing some kind of like rebellious, like I'm not getting vaccinated, I'm living in a trailer off the grid, and I'm going to like feed myself not using normal industrialized systems. That's pretty crazy to think about. But I mean, if they try to force vaccines on people, that's kind of what's going to happen for those of us that won't comply. So
the more I think about this, actually kind of sounds good, man. Like, obviously, I don't want a bunch of sheeple to get their DNA altered and become patented products owned by Monsanto.
Which is that's what's on the table. Let's be honest.
Yeah, if they modify your DNA and they own the patent to that modification, they own your DNA. Isn't that weird? I mean, obviously they can't own that in reality, but on paper, the theys own a lot of shit. And we don't own anything on paper, even the houses that we buy. So, okay, so this idea of revolution and rebellion, let's hopefully just intend, like, I think it could be all really good, but let's intend that the real rebellion isn't like a fight. We can't kill the government. At the end of the day, that's not really an option, nor does it sound like it would be a good solution. But if this was like a hill that people are willing to die on, the jab, if you will, as they call it in England, then maybe 100,000, maybe 1 million people in this country decide they're not going to get it, even if that means they can't buy, sell, and trade, to use the old phrases. And the big problem with volunteering your way out of this bad volunteer system into a more reality-based voluntary system, then that the way out has always been clouded by the fact that many of us are scared of, like, well, what do I do if I leave Babylon? Do I just walk around the woods by myself? What am I going to do? No one's going with me. But a lot of people that were quote unquote even normies a year or two ago are saying, there's no way I'm going to take that thing if they make it mandatory. And if the way they make it mandatory is by restricting or cutting off your ability to do commerce, maybe that's a good thing at the end of the day, because maybe that'll turn a lot of people into force people to turn towards each other and say, all right, well, I can't do this alone, but you want out too. I want out. What are we going to do? And do this together. I mean, what 10 families can do on 1 acre of land is unbelievable. Like, how did we ever get tricked into not living the way that we always lived is what blows my mind. And it was a slow, gradual boiling the frog process, but I do think that we're heading towards a type of a schisming that will be a lot of frogs jumping out of the pot because they turned up the heat too fast this year. But I'm sure you might have some responses to all that. But in the next 15 minutes, I'm also curious to see if we can, if you know anything about like past great conjunctions, anything historical pattern wise that's going on. I was only able to look up one particular pattern we can talk about, but it's a very interesting next month we're going to be having, I think.
Yeah. Well, so I was actually pulling up just dates of the previous conjunctions, because I haven't done a ton of like real like deep diving into the great conjunction concept. But I mean, I do know, I've been following astrology long enough where literally people were talking about this like 4 or 5 years ago. Like if you know something is on its way and where you're talking about it 4 or 5 years ahead of time, it is significant. But so off the top of my head, one thing that's significant is, so like we said earlier, we're shifting into conjunctions happening only in air signs, whereas previously they were all in earth signs. There was kind of a hiccup where we did already go into an air sign conjunction, and that happened, I think, in 1980, like around 1980 was the first time in that 200-ish year period where the conjunction did take place in an air sign. And then 20 years later, it went back to Earth. So if you can think about the shift from the 70s to the 80s, that's a pretty noticeable shift just in like pop culture alone. In the way that like around from 1980 to the year 2000, that weird 20-year period was like the birth of the internet. It was in the 80s, like lots of Wall Street action, lots of like synth music, kind of more of a robot vibe. And I think of that shift a lot off the top of my head. But then around 2000, we switched back into Earth for one final shebang. And now when this next one is coming up, it's only air for the whole rest of the cycle. And so if you can think about, the shift from the 70s to the 80s happening around 1980, that energy shift, I mean, it's somehow going to be like that again. And whatever shift happened from the 80s and 90s, and then from the 2000s and 2010s, going back to Earth and back to sort of the, I don't know, materialism and like conquering the earth and all of that. I mean, that was like right when I think of that year 2000 forward, I think of George Bush and sort of like the greed and stuff like that. But it's, this next one is sort of like the big one. And this is like long term. And when you think of the last era, it began around the time of like the Industrial Revolution. So when they talk about the Great Reset and all of these things, like the Fourth Industrial Revolution, it's kind of similar. Like the last time this elemental shift happened was when factories began to just like ship things all over the planet and expand, and the Jupiterian expansion with the Saturnian structuring of material things and materialism. And now with the air sign, it's going to be like the same thing, except we're not having like railroad tracks and steam engines. It's going to be all like servers and Wi-Fi, and it's literally going to be traveling through the air, And when you think about the Industrial Revolution, it's like a paradox thing where it's like, it was a spike in our evolution. It was like a big thing that changed our paradigm, and it changed our lifestyles, changed how we buy and sell and manufacture and have our ideas of prosperity because of these great factories and our factory workers. And that's when Marxism came forward. Like, Marxism is so freaking out of date because it was made during the Industrial Revolutionary times when like people were being exploited by factories, but that's not how things are now. And yet all these people still love Marxism and communism. But in this digital age, I mean, you already hear about it. It's like you're going to get UBI, and your like Fed coins that you get from your UBI, you can only spend on certain things. You can't save or invest with that money. You just have to be sort of fed it. And so, yeah, it's going to be
the UBI thing. That's like, just to throw something in here, that's like the negative manifestation of Uranus and Taurus, because that's like you're having freedom in relation to your resources, and it's a technological type of freedom, and that like your earth-based resources, as in what you need to survive, could be now just provided to you freely, but it comes with a catch. Like, is that the way that you're like, there's two ways that this could possibly manifest for you, this Uranus in Taurus. It's either could be like on the government dependency or on the power of your own ingenuity.
Yeah, definitely. And Uranus and Taurus is just revolutionizing the idea of money, because money falls into Taurus. So yeah, it's money and food are like two big things with Taurus, and like how we feed ourselves and how we manage our resources. When they're revolutionized like that, I can't help think of like Bitcoin and blockchain and stuff like that. And like I said, I feel like the Aquarian stuff is imminent. Like there's nothing we can really do to escape it. The sky is telling us this is our period in time. So yeah, I think if you are trying to fight the powers that be, you shouldn't. I think. Well, I'm not an expert in cryptocurrency or blockchain things or anything like that, or like 3D printing. But as long as it can be independent and sovereign, I think the goals of Aquarius with like humanitarian goals or collectivist ideals, I think it can be possible, but you have to focus on that like Uranian individualistic side of Aquarius versus the Saturnian, like rigid commie style Aquarius.
And it's just weird that this is, I just never would have thought when I was like a teenager, well, when you're in your early 30s, you're going to be speaking out against communism in a journalistic fashion. I'll just be like, what? Well, I don't care about that.
Another thing too that doesn't have anything to do with astrology. I don't know if you ever heard of the idea of like the fourth turning. It's like there's a book that came out in the 90s, and I listened to it on audiobook, but it made the case that we go through cycles in civilization of like spring, summer, fall, winter, and it's a generational thing. And this author was saying like the millennials will be in a World War III situation because that's like the winter. By the time they're adults, that's like the winter phase. So they make the argument that the last winter was like during World War II. And, you know, after winter comes spring, and the children of the spring are always really creative and spiritual. So that was like the boomer hippie people. And then fall was in like the 80s and 90s and early 2000s. And that's when everything is just in a decline. Like, it's not horrible, but it's on the way towards winter, and everything is crumbling and decaying. And we've been technically in this fourth winter season of civilization. I mean, when the guy wrote the book, he said it would be like in the 2010s and the 2020s that this stuff would happen, but I think it really got vamped up more recently. So I think it is sort of like natural for civilization to kind of go through these phases. And they always say too, like, you know, the boomers are an example. It's like, I forget how they phrase it. It's like weak men create bad societies and bad society. I'm stumbling over my words right now.
It's like strong men create good times.
Yes.
Good times create weak men. Weak men create bad times. And it just is like, I don't know. I'm probably getting it wrong too, but it's something like that. I mean, that's like the breath. It's part of the heartbeat of this fractal we're in, that things are always on a sine wave, a rise and fall. And yeah, the thing about winter is if you didn't prepare, you could die.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't want to scare people by saying that, but we're getting close to the wrap up. So we're going to carry over some of these ideas into hour 2 for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I'll go ahead and like say the weird thing that I found about this conjunction stuff was that apparently every year that there's been a great conjunction that was an election year, except with one exception, which was 2000, which is interesting because you were just talking about it, but apparently every time there was an election year, there would be like grievous harm or assassination done to the president that got elected that year. I'm not saying I think that would happen to Biden, but I mean, he does look like he could just die or like walk in front of a bus or something on accident. I mean, he doesn't look like he's doing too great. So plus anyone that wanted to foment more division with this WCW politics would, I mean, the assassination card, they haven't played that one in a while. I mean, either side, if that happened to either side, the other side, or their side would get pretty radical over it. So I'm not trying to spread doom and gloom and fear or anything, but it's just, that was a weird pattern I saw, was that, like Reagan elected in 80, shot in 81, for example. It doesn't necessarily happen to them that year. It was just, for some reason, that's what came up whenever I did a 5-minute Google research on historical patterns and great conjunctions.
I remember learning about that in like junior high history. I remember it as they were talking about how there was like a curse on the president that if you were born in a year that ends in a 0, or not born, if you were elected in a year that ends in a 0, that you would be assassinated. And I think Reagan maybe broke the curse, they said, but it's still unclear whether it's really broken. But it is interesting that aligns with those like 20-year conjunctions.
Yeah, but okay, we got a minute and a half in the first hour. I mean, it's not strict, but let's go ahead and tell people where they can find you. You know, take your time, of course. Tell them what Cosmic Keys even is, and like, you know, how they can connect with you. And thanks for this fun first hour too. It's been awesome.
Yeah, thanks. It's always fun to sort of sort these ideas out. And to answer that question, Cosmic Keys was a podcast started by me and my co-host Scarlett Ravenswood, actually on the winter solstice of 2018. So this grand conjunction happens on the second birthday of the show. Scarlett left the show this past summer. We started it when we both lived in Chicago, and I moved to Colorado, and then she moved to Dallas. We're both doing different things, and to maintain it remotely was pretty difficult. So then now it's just a solo show, and I've been doing the solo episodes since about September, and I do cover astrology in every intro with like a little forecast for the week ahead. That is if the episode's released on time. But the subject matter it's kind of similar to Interverse. I mean, it's kind of just whatever is interesting. But what I consider interesting is usually in the realms of like spirituality, consciousness, the paranormal, the occult, or conspiracies. So that's kind of what I've been talking about lately. And it's been interesting keeping the show going in this I call it the 2.0 version of the show because, it used to be a show with two hosts, a guy and a girl. I would do the astrology. Scarlett would do the tarot. Mostly talked only about spiritual, woo-woo, witchy, or old things. And now that it's just like my show, it sticks to the roots of that, but it's kind of more open-ended at this point. So if you want to listen, you can go to any podcast player. You can find Cosmic Keys. And I do readings that you can book on our website, cosmickeyspodcast.com. And on Instagram, I'm at cosmic_keys_podcast. Twitter is at Cosmic Keys 777. And that's about it, I think.
Awesome. Well, we'll wrap this up. The recording started to get a little choppy right there, but I think they could still basically make it all out. I could. And go follow Dan. Like you said, man, it's a lot similar to Interverse. I guess that's why we're both on the fringe.fm, in the fringe of conversation.
And I should make a comment on that. The show was usually released on every Sunday night or Monday, and the Fringe was playing us every Monday evening. Then when the show became 2.0, I kind of released them not on a regular schedule like that. So I think I still am totally all about the Fringe FM. Love the Fringe. But I don't know if it's been released as of late just because of that change.
I'll be honest. I don't even know if my show's ever aired on it.
I think I've seen you. I think I've seen you on the Fringe because I like the Fringe FM. I listen to Lighting the Void live a lot. And it is a great channel, but just with like the wild and crazy scheduling problems of podcasting right now, when you have your own life that you're living, I haven't totally released it every Monday on time so that the Fringe can play it on Monday night. But I guess
no one holds it against you, man. It's just like the seasons thing. It's really unrealistic to think you can do the same thing week in and week out with without changing it up. Like, I was 10 days between episodes, and then 2 came out within 3 days of each other. That's just like, just do what I can. I know you do too. And we need your support out there. So you can also support Dan on Patreon. And I think you should.
Yeah. As I was telling Chance, when Scarlett left the show, so did a lot of my patrons. So my Patreon is a little bit empty at the moment. So there's plenty of room if you do want to support me on Patreon, because it is helpful. I mean, these things they take a lot. Podcasting is a dedicated art. And
if me and you were pretty girls, we would have so many followers.
Right. Unfortunately, I'm like a bum in the dark in the glow of this laptop in my room drinking a beer. But I promise it's awesome to be a patron on Patreon.
It is. Put your energy into good things, people. All right, we'll wrap up the first hour and catch everyone on the second who's in Plus. And thanks, dude.
Yeah, thank you, Chance.
All right. Hey, Plus people, we're back. You're the ones we really want to talk to anyway.
Yeah, for real. I just packed a chillum, so it's about to get real.
Dude, cheers. Yeah, I mean, you're in Colorado, so it's when in Rome, right?
Yeah, I am in Colorado, and I mean, I like weed, but being here turns you into much more of a stoner, which is, it's not the best thing always, if I do say so myself.
there's ups and downs. I mean, at least you get to pick what kind of stoner flavors you want. Like the best thing about when I went to Colorado earlier this year was that I could get some heavy duty sativas, which for me, they don't slow me down at all. Like it's like just amps up my brain, sometimes it gives me too much energy, but it's better than coffee. So anyway, for me, that's the biggest downside of prohibition is you don't know where it came from. Possibly you don't even know the effects of it or the name of the strain possibly until you just try it out. And I do think I heard the most hilarious thing. I think they were talking about cigarettes, but which just makes no sense. But I heard that COVID cases were 19% less likely in people who smoked.
I heard that too. Yeah. And,
do you think that was just like the big tobacco companies are like, oh, this is a great opportunity. Let's just put out this study sneakily. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to believe with anything related to the virus, but I could see weed somehow having effect, but I don't know about cigarettes. But I don't know. Maybe if it has something to do with like your respiratory system, like being all scarred up. Maybe that that nice that layer of tar stops the viral particles from going from your lungs to the rest of your body. Yeah,
along with the oxygen.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean that's the irony of that is like, well, you're going to be just low key sick all the time. So it's not really an effective countermeasure.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what to think about any of that, but
I am interested in hearing about Colorado though. Like how's that transition going for you? I mean, it may seem like basic everyday life stuff, but hearing people's stories that have made leaps of faith like that is always, I mean, I need to hear it. I'm on the precipice of a lot of leaps of faith myself.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a long story, but I can make it as concise as possible. But so
that's up to you.
Yeah, well, like it's coming up on a year. I literally drove into Breckenridge on New Year's Eve, and so last year, like the first year I started Cosmic Keys, I was actually squatting in an art studio outside of Chicago. It was like in Evanston, Illinois, which is where Northwestern University is, because I knew I wanted a studio to record music, and I was so antisocial and like such a hermit at that point anyways. And I found this like coach house that had, it was like in a backyard of an old home that was built like in the 1800s, and they used to have like coach houses. So the detached garage had this like finished room in the middle of the two garages, and it had like a windows and a wood burning stove and a little garden. And it was in this Evanston's a cool town. And I was renting an apartment for a while, and then I was like, you know what? I can just live in this studio. So that's really when the show started. I was editing the show in that studio. It was like $300 a month. So, I mean, that was like my semi off the grid experience. Like I had a gym membership, and I literally just showered at the gym and, cooked with like a little toaster oven or microwave and crock pot. And it was a great experience. And I have fond memories of it, but at the time I needed a day job, and I was trying to get away from Lyft and Uber because I did that for a long time. And I was a real estate agent for a while, and I was like, I had a gut feeling that it was a bad call, but I was like, I need a real job. I don't care. It can be flexible for my creative endeavors. So I did that for like a year as an agent in Evanston. So I was like freaking putting on dry clean clothes and then like going back to my little hermit's den and squatting. And after the podcast was rolling for a year, some artistic achievements were achieved to an extent with that space. But by the fall of 2019, I knew about the astrology of 2020. I had an apocalyptic feeling back then too. And also just one day was like, being a real estate agent here with this lifestyle is really stupid. I'm out. So I quit. I visited my friend in Denver and we did a little trip to Moab last fall around Halloween. And I just had a realization. I was sitting there in Colorado, like, cause I went to school in Boulder and I lived in Colorado for like 4 years in my college years. And when I was there, I was like, oh yeah, I can be this version of myself here. I have these memories. I have these friends that are still here. I have roots here. I can live a better life here. And there's no reason at all to stay in Chicago, especially now that I don't have a job. And so then I went home and was like, okay, I'll move this winter, because my friend who I was staying with in Denver was making the move from Denver to Breckenridge. And he was making that leap, which was a little bit less extreme, but I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do that move. And in the month of November, I just hit this like seasonal depression rock bottom. And it was literally rock bottom. And I was like, there is no fucking reason to stay here. There's no reason to, like, this is it. This is my sign. I'm at rock bottom. The only thing to do is like get myself out of this hole. And I mean, I knew, and it was really like I had a lot of emotions leaving Chicago, but it's kind of like an abusive relationship where you sort of like keep forgiving this person, even though it's not a person, it's a place. And
hold on, let me correct you. Chicago is a person, legally speaking. It's a corporation, and corporations are persons.
Okay.
Persons aren't living things. They're titles. Weird, but
well, yeah, I had an abusive relationship.
Chicago is a bad person.
And I still have mad love for Chicago. Like, my family's still there, and I hate to be that person that's like rude to people that are still there. Like, oh, I'm so much better. I'm gone finally. And it's like, these people still call that place home. So I don't like to like be that negative about it. But as far as, as far as my life out here, I'm living in a ski town. So like, and I'm a snowboarder. So there's more people that are like me here in where I live than at home in Chicago. Like, so it's really crazy when you move and you just find people that you vibe with, and you think about where you were and how you didn't vibe. And yet I stayed in Chicago for 7 years, and I should have known that I was happier in Colorado. I had more friends that I had more in common with in Colorado, but I had this like family related idea of like being loyal and being there for my family and friends that I grew up with. But after being there for so long, I realized like they would probably just rather have me be happy. So nobody was really holding me back except myself. But living here too is, Colorado's changed a lot since I graduated college in 2010, just because Denver has changed a lot. And, I used to make fun of Denver and I still sort of do, but because I was like a Chicago asshole, I was like, oh, this isn't a real city. And back in 2010, my limited exposure to Denver, that was my point of view. But then closer to now, when I visited in like 2018, 2019, I'm like, okay, Denver has a pulse now. Like, Denver actually is kind of on the map, in my opinion. But by that point, I didn't want to return to anything remotely urban. I just wanted to be as far away from that as possible. So I like Denver now, but I'm at the point where I don't like cities anymore. So I don't really like Denver at the end of the day either. But because Denver expands, everything else expands, and it's just rapid violence, gentrification everywhere. And now I find myself talking about gentrification in like rural towns. Like there's so many rural towns that are basically being gentrified and suburbanized, and that's definitely happening out in these like little mountain towns. And people do get priced out and stuff, and it's more on the map. There's a different vibe in Colorado. Like Colorado, when I started college, it was like a red state, and now it's just like Austin or Portland. And it's not as extreme as Portland, obviously, but it's just like a typical West blue area. And I don't really have a problem with that, but it is interesting just hearing, just thinking that I'm in a small semi-rural area, but it's really still has the values of like Denver or any other city that has the same generic freaking points of view that are just mainstream.
I think it's the youth influx that did that flip from red to blue. So many that have been trained their whole life that, you know, what's good and what's bad from the professors. I mean, I also got a liberal arts degree. Like you said, I was an English major. They kicked me out of journalism school. Look at me now.
Yeah, I was English as well. So you wrote papers on critical theory, I'm sure.
Yeah, they'd be like, okay, write this paper 4 ways. And they're like, from Marxist, from critical, from feminist, from whatever. Like, they give you these lenses to look at the world through. And like that, you're supposed to just be able to, you're supposed to only think about things through the form of whatever lens that you decide is your lens. They're like training you to do that. It's really bizarre. You don't notice it at the time. At the time, you're just like, okay, this is just a prompt. I'm going to follow it. I'm going to, you know, and I'm not even saying that the teachers that I had were bad people.
I'm not saying that either.
I only encountered a couple bad ones.
It's a cult though. Like
there was some
indirectly a cult.
Oh, it is a cult. Academia is a cult. Absolutely. I mean, scientism is a cult. Anything that is authority driven is basically a cult, right? So at this point, that's how all of these institutions run. It's not merit of ideas that rises to the top. It's like, what is getting paid? What's getting funded? You know, what type of, who are the investors? Who's on the board of directors? Those kind of questions. I mean, we know, at least I think we know if we've looked at it. I mean, we know as the information is available to see that with medical stuff, for example, like the way that Western medicine developed was entirely because the Rockefeller family began taking up seats or like putting their people in positions on medical school boards, like boards of directors, and slowly but surely pushing things towards this completely shifted paradigm that we now find ourselves deeply entrenched in, which is that, like many other institutions that are highly regulated and completely owned by their own insurance companies, they have to just follow orders and procedures. That's like what doctors and nurses do. They are literally just procedure followers, no different than military or police are order followers. And at the end of the day, that's like what's killing the human spirit, because the spirit is about free will. And doing the right thing is about doing the right thing for its own sake, not because the authority told you what was right and what was wrong. Anyway, that was a lot of ranting and tangents, but I think you were definitely prophetic to get out of the cities. I mean, look what's happening now. People are evacuating en masse. It's pretty crazy, and good for them. I want them to get out of the big cities. Historically, those are the most dangerous places to be when shit goes bad. The bigger the population center, it's like locusts, man. Humans at a certain threshold, mass hysteria takes over and the swarm happens. And not to be like negative, but just get away from the swarm. Don't be involved in that. Nothing good ever comes of swarms.
Yeah, I mean, I like cities, and like when I grew up in the suburbs, it was kind of an escape because there was a train station in my town, and I could be like, I'm going to a concert, Mom and Dad. I'll be home, I promise, by the last train. And they'd be like, oh, okay, that's fun. But like they were like jam band concerts, and I was like taking shroom chocolates. But I like the buzz of a city, and there is a cool energy of it when there's that many people together, and there are cool underground things that can thrive in a city. But I was also like, a lot of people live in a city and they just like commute, and they're on the same train every day, and they see the same blocks every day, and they very, very rarely venture out. But I was working real estate jobs where I was driving all over the place, and that's why I like having a day job that allows you to drive around, because you do connect with the place, and there's a lot of space for like daydreaming and ideas popping into your head. But I did real estate, and then I did Uber and Lyft for like years. And so it wasn't just like I was living in a condo and like going to my office. I was like in every nook and cranny of the city, which was cool. But by 2019, I just saw the gentrification everywhere, the horrible architecture of these new buildings, the fact that there was just Starbucks, Target, like all these corporate stores in all these neighborhoods that used to be kind of ghetto but cool. Now they're not ghetto, and they're just gentrified, and all the street lights are like blue LEDs. And I was just like, after like literally circling around the city year after year after year and seeing just what gentrification does, I was just like, there's nothing special or unique or worn in about cities anymore. They all look the same across the country, across the globe, with this ticky-tacky architecture, with these glass cubes and squares. And I was just, I think the art, it's weirdly enough, the architecture and the construction and the gentrification made me resent city life so much, because I would just, I was driving these Uber people around, and people get in your car dressed like they're like a freaking hipster, like the most unique snowflake, one of a kind, punk, like free spirit you've ever seen. And they're all the same. They all live in a glass cube in a gentrified neighborhood. They work in corporate jobs, and they're not unique at all. And their lifestyle is actually kind of gross, just like jumping. It's very materialistic and dense. And so like as an artist, I'm inspired by scenes that exist in cities, or just like communities that exist in cities. But in general, I saw it. I was like, there is nothing cool about the city anymore. It's all gentrified. It's all hipsterfied. Hipsters are not cool. Hipsters work in offices now, and they're assholes. And I was just like, get me the fuck out of here. So it was a very kind of abrupt decision to pack up and leave, but it was such a gut feeling, and I was so emotional, like saying goodbye in a way, and just like hitting rock bottom. But I knew there was no other option but to get the fuck out. So it was kind of dramatic at the end of the day.
I think the most interesting aspect of what you're talking about that pops out in my head is the buzz of being in a big city, the energy of it, the vibe. And this connects back to a lot of the first hour stuff about Aquarius and things being in the air, because the part of this fourth industrial revolution, or whatever, part 4, reset number 4, whatever this is, like the next 200-year cycle of things going in the air. It's the atmosphere is electrified, man. Like literally, this is not this. We are not living in the same realm that we used to live in. I mean, it's like if we were in a giant aquarium and they replaced all the water with a different liquid. It's almost like that. I mean, that's kind of where we're at. And then the other side of of what that buzz of being around a lot of people can be like, can be totally positive. I mean, you talked about going to see jam bands and eat mushrooms, and like, I obviously look at my t-shirt. I love music festivals. I love art and real counterculture, which is really just culture, because the cult is the counterculture, the mainstream cult. It's literally counter to the human spirit and to, you know, our individuality and uniqueness. But when we get together with a lot of people that are actually, you know, strong in spirit, in that type of bubble that we can create, like you roll up to a festival that you know is going to be full of a lot of really awesome, open-minded, loving people. And then some of them might be extreme Democrats. Some of them might be extreme Republicans. They leave it at the door, except for, you know, artists like Grizz, who decide to make that the main point of their set in recent years, of just like, fuck Trump, barf. I hate that. Obviously, guys like him too. Just side note. Their meteoric rise to fame. He's from Chicago. That's kind of an interesting connection. Their meteoric rise to fame is no accident. I mean, no 21-year-old should reasonably be as famous as he was instantly. It's just not real. And then, boom, the puppeteers pull the strings and they try to influence that big group hive mind that's in a positive, open, receptive place, even, you know, infiltrating even our most sacred areas like these concerts and stuff that now we're not even really allowed to have this year. But my point is that we could definitely use that sort of, you know, collective hive mind, that electrified atmosphere to our advantage. I think people's intuition is stronger than it's ever been. I experience more psychic phenomenon with more people than ever before. More people seem to point it out, like, wow, I'm pretty sure I just thought what you were about to say before you said it. You know, like kind of normie people to a degree. I think that's all also connected to what level of health that individual is maintaining, how much those things are coming out. But like, my point is that if we built the intentional communities that we were fantasizing about in hour one, then I think that buzz could really, in and of itself, be part of what keeps the peace, so to speak. Like, everybody's just in the same frequency mindset. Like, do you really need policing? Do you really need like some sort of boss that is like your corporate ruler handing you down the 10 commandments? Or do people in that environment just naturally lean towards conscience and lean towards, you know, love thy neighbor because they're right there in front of you? It's just so much easier to be an asshole through a screen. And people show me every day the people that if I was talking to them face to face, they never talk to me like that at all. You know, so I think that's, you know, there's hope in things going up into the air. Things are up in the air, though. That's also the phrase for things being very unknown where we are in this time. Like, where's it all going to land?
Yeah, I have a feeling that I think there still needs to be a release. I don't think anybody on the left or the right, on the pro-mask or anti-mask side, has had an adequate release of stress. And that's what makes me worried about like a civil war or some kind of economic crash, because the tension is just bottled up. And anytime,
dude, I feel like a bottle of soda that's shaken up but not opened. That's literally what my body feels like in the last couple of weeks. It's so weird.
Yeah, I think there's going to be some kind of kaboom moment, but I wasn't expecting November to be the way it was, like with Biden being announced the winner. And I was I voted for Donald Trump. I did vote, but like, I'm not crazy about him. And I've in my head accepted that Biden is the winner. And I've in my head accepted that Trump might come back and take it back. And I think both of those are dead ends in a way. Like, I don't think I don't think either of those events give relief to anything. I think it just bottles it up more and shakes things up more. So maybe 2021 will have some kind of kaboom moment. And honestly, I'm still waiting for the economy to crash. Like I really I don't see that not happening, because from 2008 forward, all of that, everything that was fixed by that was very artificial. And it was like on quantitative easing or whatever. And it's just like printing more money. And when they're talking about this great reset, I mean, that's going to be it. It's going to be a reset of money and stuff. So yeah, it's like we have to figure out some kind of counterculture, or like you're saying, we're going to be on the edge of Babylon alone in the woods. But I think there's a lot of us out there that are, I think it's really just, are you truly a critical thinker? Do you have a high enough IQ where you don't buy into this bullshit? Like, I think it's really showing me how smart people are, because I'm seeing people, seeing multiple friends say the same phrases to me. The same arguments are just the same phrases. And I'm realizing that like the mainstream narratives are reinforced by just having these phrases, phrase that's on the media over and over and over again. And there's different levels of comprehension where you have to be kind of smart to understand this phrase, or you have to be a little bit smarter to understand this argument. And then people just repeat the argument, and they're not coming up with ideas on their own. They're parroting what the media is telling them. And maybe if it was NPR, it's a sort of hard thing to conceptualize and explain, but they feel super smart when they parrot that. Or if it's really dumbed down and it's on CNN, they parrot that. And then it's like, that's like the discourse. And I hear the same phrases from multiple different people, and then literally like catch them when I'm at their house. I turn the TV on and CNN was the last thing that was watched. So I'm just realized like so many of these things, especially with memes and social media, people are just parroting, and the people that are creating these phrases in this script are social engineers. It's all social engineering. So
yeah, I mean, you can go look up institutions like Tavistock and just read their papers. I mean, everything that the controllers have been doing for ever, really, it's always been very well documented. And in most times in history, the proletariat was way too illiterate for that to matter. But now they just count on the fact that people are too inundated with useless information and entertainment for it to matter, or that it just won't even be comprehended when they put it out there. Like the thing that floated around the internet from 2010, the Rockefeller white paper that explained basically the exact situation of pandemic lockdowns as one of 4 possible steps towards the type of one world government that they wanted. I mean, it's just, they wrote it all out. Like it could go one of 4 ways. And one of the 4 ways was exactly the pandemic thing that we're doing right now. Very, very interesting. And then of course, so the Event 201 thing, I'm sure you've heard of that.
Yeah.
If people aren't familiar with that, I mean, this is old news, but last year in October, Bill Gates and other big time international so-called health organizations, hell organizations more like, were putting together some sort of exercise drill practice run where they simulated a global pandemic. I think it was even a coronavirus in their simulation. And they did a lot. They, simulated what would happen from lockdowns and the economy shutting down. And they had it all planned out. And so what's interesting about this, why I'm bringing up that particular example, I think it connects really well to this idea of, someone popping the cork off of the champagne bottle, so to speak, and celebrating their victory over in this alchemical transmutation of the human mind from something higher to something lower, like in mass. It's big, inverted, great work. 21 is a really interesting number. It's like a 777 for one. It's blackjack, you could say, which is a weapon. And as you know, it's also like you win with 21. There's a lot of connotations to 21. I mean, the 777 one is a big one. And specifically to talk about like who pulls the strings really and where this all comes from. I mean, maybe there's things behind it too, families behind it that we will never know about, but the ostensible face of the entrenched power system of the world for the last 2,000 years or so we're led to believe, according to the history they gave us, is the Vatican. And the Vatican has this group called the Jesuits, which are sort of like the original intelligence agency, gangster, occultist, mind control people. Like they wrote the book on mind control, both for individuals and for societies. The Jesuits did. Creepy people. And they are really, really into the number 201 and specifically 201, but also 21. There's a lot of reasons for that. That's like a longer story, but just trust me when I say like 21 is for these like sorcerers, 21 is a big deal to them. They have a lot of interest in numerology. They have a lot of interest in making the things that they do align with cycles of nature, of all kinds, from color to tone to frequency to time of the year to you name it. It's all like wrapped up in the spell casting because that's part of like, it's a lot more, you know, it's like when you tell a lie, it needs to have the trappings of truth for someone to believe it. And all magic is the transforming of consciousness of either yourself or another person. You change their perception of what is real, what they think is real. And that's really the only kind of magic that can be done. But if you do that at the deepest level of someone's being, you literally put them in a holographic overlay of reality. They're like in a cartoon. They live in a cartoon and they don't even know it. And so 2001, that's a 21, and 2021 has a 21 in it. I don't know. I just think that like it's obvious that lockdowns aren't going to be over when we go into next year. So like, are we really up for doing this for another year? Are we going to be sufficiently traumatized by possible starvation in some parts of the world, or maybe even in this country over the winter because of all the crazy stuff that's been happening to food supply lines? Like it just, I wonder how hard they're going to kick people before they hand them a bone, which is the universal basic income and the universal dependency. By the way, the word Catholic means universal. So it's really Catholic basic income.
Well, I'm a Catholic too. I was raised Catholic. And I'm with you on the 21 thing. And especially with, I really think 2021 is going to be the brave new world. Like really out there. It's out there now. This is like prepping us for that. But when I look at the astrology and stuff, I really think it is going to be this like brave new world. And I think we're going to get some relief in 2022 when Jupiter goes into Pisces, because Jupiter rules Pisces. And also, and another interesting thing with the planets and with what's going on is that the United States is in its Pluto return. So it takes Pluto 200 whatever years to make one lap around the zodiac. And when you think of your Saturn return as being a harsh time of Saturn constricting you and you're forced to grow older, Pluto return. Pluto is like the underworld planet of destruction and evolution and power. And it's a wrecking ball force. So America itself is going through a Pluto return that's
what I was about to say.
it might not even like survive, honestly. So it might be the end of the American empire for real. And who knows what that means. But I think freedom seekers will always try to adjust and move to somewhere where they can be sovereign. I mean, that's where that's hypothetically what our ancestors did when they moved to America or immigrated here. But I don't know if America will last its Pluto return. But everything that's happening now is related to all that. So we'll see. But like the next 10 years, when they say Agenda 2030, I thought it was Agenda 2021 or 2020 originally, but then they had to add 10 years, which is at least a good sign that they're pushing it further back. But yeah, they're already putting the messaging out there that by 2030 you won't even recognize this world because they're going to totally transform it. And I think 2021 is going to be Brave New World with lots of revolutionary resistance. So I know me personally, I'm going to try to just like focus on the Uranian energy, the Taurus energy, and be on that side, and then try to be conscious of all the Saturnian things happening in the Aquarian realm, I guess. So,
man, but the problem, not to be doom and gloom, but like the what's unfortunate about this situation is no matter what like you and I do and how we change, the Earth is still being terraformed. Like that's crazy to me. I mean, there's so much going on to alter this environment in ways that, I mean, it's not going to be reversible anytime soon. We don't really even know the extent of what is being done, but it's really unimaginable stuff when you think about what that means for the fractal. If this all really is just one thing that we're embedded in that expresses itself holographically and the whole is in every part, well, what happens to every part when you fucking turn the whole into something that it was never otherwise going to be? Because I talked about on your show, like the difference between artificiality and reality. And I still think that philosophy is really, I mean, love it or hate it, I think it's going to be what decides whether or not humans survive, because I just don't see how we can alter nature so dramatically and expect that like that's going to work out well for us because we emerged from nature. So anyway, part of this terraforming is, of course, like Creepy Joe is saying mandatory vaccines. Trump was saying he was going to have the military help distribute them. They're both pro the vaccine. That tells you that at the end of the day, that's the most important thing to come out of all of this madness, is that everyone's getting the shot, or else things aren't going back to normal, or else it won't go back to normal for you. But, you know, whenever things are injected into our bodies, it also becomes part of the environment, because no matter what, at some point, what's in us goes out there and in some way, shape, or form. And what's out there comes into us. So it just makes me really wonder about I'm not scared, because I think that like life is itself inextinguishable. Like, and that's what we are. That's the most innermost reality to any of us, is the life force energy itself. But man, I wonder what it's going to look like, and like what stewardship of the earth and stewardship of nature is going to require for, you know, if I drop back in here 70 years after this incarnation, like what kind of work am I going to have ahead of me? And I really want to think that far ahead for the life I'm in right now. Not a 5-year plan, but like, let's talk about 5 lifetime plan. You know what? I don't want to set myself up for.
I don't want to come back here at this rate.
Yeah, well, exactly. But I also do want to come back here. And I want to have a life here where all these things that were just default settings when I came in on this one aren't those things. And like, you know, either return a life where we're more in harmony with nature. That'd be great. Or even, man, I can dream, can't I? Like technology and nature coexisting in harmony. Like that would be so cool. I really think I would like to have an experience of life like that, where it wasn't completely dampened by, you know, slavery.
Yeah. I think it's super important to be hopeful. And, yeah, I'm really,
Can I read a quote here real quick?
Yeah.
Okay, it's real short. Benjamin Rush is one of the signers of the Constitution. He says, unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize itself into an undercover dictatorship. To restrict the art of healing to doctors and deny equal privileges to others will constitute the Bastille of medical science. All such laws are un-American and despotic. That's what the terraforming is really doing. It's like we're terraforming our own governance into being ruled by the priesthood of doctors and scientists.
Yeah, I don't even know what to believe these days, but if you have the perspective that nature will balance itself out at a certain point, even I don't know if the terraforming could really permanently destroy life on this earth.
No, but that's my point. It can't, but we might not get to be here anymore.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think when it hits its critical breaking point, then it might be really catastrophic. And we hear the stories about this happening in the past, whether it's like the Tower of Babel or Atlantis. I think it's a cyclical thing. And when you were talking about like the mandatory vaccines and stuff and all that, I think at this point, the controllers should be aware of how much resistance there is to them. And they're probably also aware of how freaking well their propaganda and their social engineering went this year. So I'm hoping that maybe at least in the US, it won't be a mandatory vaccination. But I also think that given how massively brainwashed most people are right now, they won't even need to make it mandatory. Like, they'll just exclude the dissenters from mainstream society, and there will have to be some kind of off the grid counterculture. But because they don't want to have to use force. They want to coerce us into it. And so many people right now, at least of the people in my life or the people I encounter, will gladly take a vaccine for a million different reasons right now. And I think it might be mostly just the herd mentality, because this whole thing is just making me very aware of how weird people get when they're in groups. Like, the herd mentality, the mob mentality really alters behavior. And even I fall for that too. Like, when Biden was announced the winner by the media, I sort of breathed a sigh of relief. Like, okay, let's just blue pill. Like, let's just forget about everything. And I'm merging with this mass of people that love Biden too. Like, this is easier than being angry and upset about Biden. But luckily everybody has their breaking point.
And then you put your They Live sunglasses back on. And you're like, oh, the TV's saying obey Biden.
Yeah. Everybody, I think from I hate to say self-care, but from a keeping your own, being a self-reflective individual, if people are trying to be self-reflective, we can only take so much. So even to check out every now and then is okay in my eyes. And it's not like repressing the truth or repressing the problem or ignoring it, but I think people should be able to be happy even under really extreme external circumstances, just because being balanced mentally, you can't go wrong with it. And like, if it's like doom and gloom, which I am a doom and gloomer almost, I don't want to be full like black pill and just be like, this is all horrible, because at the end of the day, like, I'm not in prison yet. Like, I'm in my house, but my house is only sort of a prison at this point. But there's still room.
Yeah,
there's
we still got
hope.
98% of, we still got a lot of our freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah. And the mandatory vaccine narrative too, everything is like wheels within wheels, you know, plans within plans, or, you know, 5D chess or whatever you want to call it. So even just throwing out the idea that mandatory vaccines are coming, with, you know, the elites, I'm sure, know very well, like you just said, that you don't need to actually make it mandatory, because people are so herd mentality right now, they'll mostly just go take it anyway. But then it just is like, okay, here's a great another angle to divide people and get the ones that really believe the story to be anti those crazy conspiracy people, because like, oh, they said this should be a mandatory vaccine. They were screaming about tyranny. And look, it's not even mandatory, but I got the vaccine of my own free will, and that makes me virtuous. And that guy that didn't get the vaccine, he deserves to not be allowed to go shop at the grocery store anymore. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, it's brilliant. I'm actually like, hats off to the Illuminati. They crushed it this year for real. Or I don't even want to say Illuminati, but like the
sorcerers,
the puppet masters, like whoever
the script writers,
whoever, yeah, like if it's Tavistock or like wherever, they come up with these plans.
Great job, Satan.
Yes, Satan won 2020 for real, but like, it's pretty impressive. It's like, if you were writing a script for a movie, it would be impressive to come up with this scenario, but this is what we got.
Yeah, I feel the same way, man. I kind of make that joke all the time. It's like, well, if I was writing 2020, the finale would be this. And it's like kind of thinking how maybe they would think, but then again, we just keep getting surprised, like blindsided. And really, it's what needs to happen. I think that's a lot is just, for me anyway, like in my personal life, some things that I've been going through recently have shown me that, well, you might not really have ever jumped off the cliff to see if you could fly unless it was starting to really hurt to stand there for some reason. Like, and that's kind of where I'm at. So I'm, you know, in a lot of ways, it's weird where everything's constantly getting better and worse at the same time. So for me, in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm in this crazy rock bottom, which, and people might look at me and be like, from the outside, and be like, that makes no sense. You know, like, I have this and that going on. It's way worse. But, you know, without getting too personal about it, for me, emotionally, I'm like that bottle all shaken up. And I've been, I think it's connected to that. It's hard for me in this year to even maintain practices that I've done for years that helped me a lot. And
yeah,
it's been like, just to get myself to do that. I just want to like play Red Dead Redemption 2 and like be a cowboy and like be this outlaw that doesn't have you know, it isn't paying taxes and evades the lawman and like tries to be honorable. Like, I'm having this very Uranian escapism draw through all of this, and kind of my raft in the stormy conspiracies is this show. And the very least, like, these weekly conversations help me repeatedly revive what the feeling and reason of why I do this and where I want to go. And so, you know, rock bottom, there's only one way to go from there. That's part of the sine wave too. It's winter. I mean,
I can only, you kind of mentioned what you were going through this year recently, and I feel for you, man. Like, I've had a couple rock bottom moments in my timeline, and I would be a little bit, well, I would try to be excited because you're doing the right thing by packing up and leaving, like, because it is cathartic and therapeutic, and it's opening new roads, like on a basic occult. Like, I don't really mess with magic and the occult that much, but I did do like a road opener spell, quote unquote, when I moved. And the road, you can just, if you go to like a Botanica, like if you go to like a Mexican candle store or just like a cult store, you can order them online. They just have a road opener candle. And if you're going to set an intention to just like open the road for new opportunities, I really like the idea of that. But that's what I was feeling last year before I moved. And when you hit that rock bottom point, it's like this upswing is about to start. So I feel for you for sure, but I'm also excited for you hearing what you're planning on doing, because that's pretty cool.
Yeah, we'll see how it goes. You know, I just have to always remind myself too that there's always the way to do what you need to do. Like, it's always going to be there, but we get caught up in projecting what we want our life to be, or where we want to be, or who we want it to be, or who we want it to be with. All these different, like, nouns and statuses and fictional stories. And it's never the reality of the moment we're in. And so we're never going to feel satisfied because we're living in an image that we're projecting of ourselves, about ourselves. And like, man, this has never been more in the collective consciousness as a mirror trying to be shown to us. Like this superficial Instagram, social media world where everything has become image, everything has become screens upon screens, personas with the mask on above the persona, and like layers of this onion, and like chipping away the sculpture to reveal this, or the rock to reveal the sculpture that's underneath this. I do like to be hopeful right now too for myself, like that the big changes I'm going through are me finally doing some things that for years I've felt like I should somehow figure out how to do. And at the end of the day, like, you're never going to know how to do it. You're just going to have to think what would be best to do next. Like, what would be serving me best to do next? If I can assume that I'm going to make all the right choices and do my best from here on out and trust myself, well, then what would be, like, risks and all, what would be the best thing to do next? Not the safest bet, but the one that is a step in the direction of who I feel I am. Not who I want to be, but who I know I already am. That's what should be guiding your steps, not like this idea of a destination. You know, long way of saying that cliche that it's about the journey, not the destination. And along the journey, that's where like surprises and synchronicity and charity and kindness and everything new comes into play.
Definitely, yeah. And synchronicity is key too, because that's kind of a good indicator. And this year, like, yeah, I was at rock bottom last fall. Then I was also kind of at rock bottom this summer. So but even in retrospect, like, would I take it back? No, honestly. Like, yeah, I moved to Colorado. I got a well-paying but basic hospitality job, made good tips all winter, because there's a ton of money that passes through a ski town in the winter, every winter. So there's money to be had. And then boom, lockdown. They close the resorts. They close the hotels. I'm laid off. No unemployment. Luckily, I had money saved. And then, it was a couple months not working and kind of like trying to function without income. Then I got a house painting job, worked that for a month, and they just fired me after a month without really a good reason other than, we don't think painting is for you. never got any like negative feedback, but I was just like in survival mode. I didn't want to paint houses, but I wanted a paycheck. And that was just like rock bottom too. But that opened a lot of doors here. And I was ready to move to Humboldt and start trimming weed. I had a friend that was like moving to Humboldt, and I was going to like live in a tent and trim weed and hope I don't get shot. That's like where my head was at in July. And luckily I didn't go through with that, but so many doors opened after that second firing, but I was at rock bottom then too. Cause it was just like, I'm sick of being in survival mode and starvation mode with no help from the government, which I'm glad in a way that I didn't get any, but now in the fall and into the winter, and there's even like been more shifts in like every season this year has been just like a radical shifts happening all the time because of these bullshit lockdowns and restrictions and whatever else. But yeah, I think in retrospect, the rock bottoms usually bring you to something better in my experience. So.
Yeah, especially if you hit the bottom screaming like a meteor, you'll break right through and come out the top.
Yeah, right on.
I don't know. Well, this feels like we're close to the hour, so we can kind of wind our way down here. But this has been fun. I mean, this is more candid and personal, and just like sort of our own feelings and emotions and thoughts on things, and just like a life conversation right here. Just very organic, kind of the like I kind of needed this, just like a good bro hangout, because it's limited right now, that availability.
Yeah, I mean, I have a stressful job. It's semi-stressful, and just like sometimes I'm just like dead, but like usually, like when I podcast after work, like on a day like today, it usually starts off like you get the ball rolling, and then all of a sudden you have all the energy back, and it's kind of crazy. But
I know, man.
It is like, great to just
on a normal night.
I'd
be going to bed right now.
Well, you can't talk about you might be lucky enough to have a friend in your life where you can go this deep into conspiracies or spirituality or whatever. You might have a friend in your personal life. I don't have that many. I have friends that can scratch the surface. I have certain friends I can go down there, but most of the time I'm connecting with people over the internet and talking about like exactly what I want to be talking about. So it's super valuable to be able to do it.
Yeah, I'm lucky to have a few good friends that can really go deep on this stuff with me, and many that can scratch a lot of the surfaces. I mean, we're all learning different parts of this puzzle, and a lot of people that are very statist in their mentality, they may have something that they've been cooking up for a while that is about to break them out of the mold entirely when they hit the friction that's inevitable for whatever they're into. Like, maybe they're getting deeper and deeper into health, and even you didn't mean to become a conspiracy theorist, but you were just trying to figure out how to take care of yourself better, and all of a sudden you stumbled into all kinds of stuff that Cabal's up to. Like there's many roads to awakening, but like once somebody gets unplugged, takes the red pill, so to speak, like you can't go back in. Like that's my ultimate reason why I'm not just hopeful. I know that the tide is going to turn, because you can't, like, nobody's going from good to evil. Like if they really figured out good for good's sake and what it means. And like, they're not just going to, they might have lapses. We all have lapses, but it's nothing permanent. Like your conscience is activated. Well, it's not turning off, but makes you wonder, because there's been so much pre-programming in the vaccine conspiracy movement about this idea that there could be a vaccine someday that represses the spirituality in people. And I've heard some conspiracy people talk about that actually apparently being a side effect of whatever new COVID vaccine is coming out. And I just look at that like, well, I'm not sure that the people I've heard say these things aren't disinformation themselves. And maybe that's just to freak people out. But I do think that that's like the hill that we should definitely make our stand on to like wrap up the thoughts on that since it came up so much.
Well, yeah, it's hard to say because I think psychedelics are becoming more available, and that will give you a mini awakening in many cases. But in a weird way too, I feel like so many of these sheepish people, even if they had the legal freedom to take psychedelics for the first time, it might just be so unpopular with these sheep that doesn't even matter. I don't know.
Yeah, because they could have always got it up to now if they really wanted to. I mean, yeah, for the most part, most people could find, at least at some point in their life, would have had an opportunity. I think that nature comes knocking in whatever form she can get to you throughout your life.
Well, I think too, like when you were talking about red pilling people or awakening people, like it would be great to be a catalyst for someone's awakening, but I think I'm sort of the belief that you shouldn't never try to awaken someone. Like,
oh yeah, it's like Morpheus says in the movie. We have a rule: we never awaken a mind once it's reached a certain age. It's dangerous. The mind has trouble letting go. They'll fight to defend the very system that's enslaved them. And yeah, I mean, I agree. It's not like I try to go get certain people in my life to go like listen to my show or something. I think it's better to just make speak the truth as you see it, and make it available. And, don't lie if a conversation is happening in the moment, but you definitely don't need to go out and try to ring alarm bells and try to wake up the sheeple, that they're going to make the choice they're going to make. At this point, the apocalypse has happened. The veil is torn to shreds. Like the man behind the curtain is there. It's just a matter of like, are you going to listen to him when he says, "Oh, don't mind the man behind the curtain," or are you going to realize it's just a little old dude? There's nothing to this house of cards. I can walk away and I could build a house out of whatever the hell I want.
Yeah, I think people have been put more asleep this year than ever before. Like, I think there has been many people that were red pilled this year, but I think there might be just as much or more that were blue pilled. And I don't know if that's just based on me living in Colorado.
But think about what that means too. Like when the choice is handed to you, that means in that moment, like Neo knows that there's something called the Matrix and that it has him. And the red pill is going to tell him the truth. And the blue pill, he can just go back to sleep. So like when we say blue pilling people, that is literally saying that there's a lot of humans that have been shown that they're in the Matrix and said, "No, thanks. I don't want to know." That is weird.
Yeah, people say that all the time. Think about anything related to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. I mean, there's just like cognitive dissonance, and
COVID swept that all under the rug pretty tidily.
Yeah, and like the minute you start to look into things, I think people can just roll their eyes and be like, okay, yeah, conspiracies, right. And feel great about it. And, sleep better at night because of that perspective. And I see it a lot. And I keep thinking about people who think they're smart. Like, okay, I think I'm kind of smart. I also think I'm kind of a dumbass, but I noticed that a lot of people that kind of jumped through the right hoops to prove themselves intelligent in like, whether it's like public schooling or college or corporate jobs, I think a lot of these people are good at regurgitation, but not smart. And a lot of people out there can use big words or repeat critical theory or parrot what they hear, you know, in the New York Times or the New Yorker, and feel very smug and content about how smart they are. But all they're doing is repeating the same damn programmed bullshit. And, you know, it's frustrating. Like people that I went to high school with that were like total jocks. Like, I'm not a fucking jock at all. Like, I am kind of a punk and an outcast. And I don't like most, I love people, but I don't like the herd at all. And I go against the grain, but somehow now I'm conservative, and these jock meathead dudes from my high school that would probably be Me Too'd if they were in prominent positions. After living in a city for 10 years and working a corporate job, they're suddenly all like liberal, super liberal, and super like #science, #stop the spread or whatever. Like they're the ones like citing these statistics from the CDC. And that's what I'm saying. They think they're smart, and they think like they have a diploma, they have a corporate job, and they can parrot these things from the CD freaking C, which is like so untrustworthy. And yet, because they're smart enough to parrot what they're telling, what the CDC says, they have this high and mighty elitist, like liberal perspective. And I thought being liberal was about being a rebel, but these are like jock meathead assholes. No, I'm not even calling them assholes. I'm generalizing a lot of people I grew up with who in high school, I would be like, they're going to be a Republican someday, you know? And now, because they've been living in cities in these little glass cube condos and working corporate jobs, all of a sudden they're like smug urban liberals who like love masks and think lockdowns are great because #science. And it's like, that's what makes me, with like my rebel spirit, just be like, fuck these guys. Like, fuck the people I went to high school with. Fuck them all.
Can I just make more laughs about this for a second with you? Because, man, okay. So Terrence McKenna, he said, in my opinion, some of the greatest words he ever said is, you can't trust smart people. What does that mean though? First of all, let's think about what smart actually means. I'm going to bust out the dictionary definition from 1828 of the word smart in a second. But second of all, like, let's just say, how does society define smart right now? Not what the actual real meaning of it in English is, which is not what most people use it to mean. Well, smart is like somebody that jumps through all the hoops correctly, follows all the orders to get all the diplomas and degrees, which is just like means you were really good at the Pavlovian conditioning to accept all the ideology that the masters wanted you to then go out and regurgitate and enact in the world as a foot soldier. So if being, degree, that's another funny word. You get degrees. Well, a degree originally is like a way of describing the severity of crime. So the higher the degree, the more capable you are of committing crimes against humanity in a public official, capacity.
Yeah.
And that's real. But so the word smart, 1828 dictionary, like what this word originally meant, what it still means to people that know English. Noun, quick, pungent, lively pain, a pricking local pain as the pain from puncture by nettles, as the smart of bodily punishment. Or just severe, pungent pain of mind, pungent grief as the smart of affliction. All right. It's also used as a verb intransitive, which is to feel a lively, pungent pain, yada, yada. Cayenne pepper applied to the tongue makes it smart. Here's a Bible verse, though. To be punished, to bear penalties or the evil consequences of anything. That's to smart, like as a verb. And in Proverbs 11:15, which they used to put Bible verses as the way to describe words, which is really interesting, especially because the law is based on the Bible originally, like constitutional law and everything. But Proverbs 11:15 says, "He that is surety for a stranger shall smart for it." What it means to be surety for a stranger, actually, that's what it means to have a legal person, a government-issued birth certificated person. You are an agent acting for a principal, and you're a surety, like like the word insurance. Your surname is the surety that the government is claiming that you are the agent for. So the Bible told us this stuff. We just didn't know what it meant. He that is surety for a stranger shall smart for it, to be punished, to bear penalties or the evil consequences of anything. And then also you can use smart as an adjective to mean all those same things. But as an adjective, it could also mean acute and pertinent, witty, as a smart reply, a smart saying. Not, though, has nothing to do with intelligence. It's just like quick, witty, acuteness. So like we just use this word in a completely lost capacity. But just looking up that one word in the 1828 dictionary and thinking about it in conjunction of like what we think it means to be smart and what these so-called smart people do, it tells you a lot, man. Like words are the code to the matrix. And once you start figuring out what they really mean and what you're really being told when these words are coming at you, whether or not the speaker even knows what they're repeating, that the dictator dictated to them, it's like you start seeing the code for, the shapes that it represents. Like the guy sitting behind the computer screen seeing, he's like, I don't even see the code anymore. I see blonde, brunette, redhead, whatever. But it's all there in the words. Yeah, this was like a fun extra little diversion here. Thanks for sticking around with me past the point.
Yeah, no worries. I'm just kicking it. Got nothing else going on tonight. Are you getting together with your family for Thanksgiving?
Yeah, just my mom and dad. My sister is going to be out of town with her husband, so we're having a little thing. But speaking of her, I actually do need to wrap this up because since she's out of town, I got to go let her dogs out.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, clock's ticking. Don't want any indoor accidents. She's got 3 giant horse dogs, so it should be fun. Wow. They're not really horses, but big ass dogs, but they're nice.
Nice, man. Well, yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. You too. I'd love to swapcast again sometime. Excited for my episode with you to come out so I can share that with my peeps too. And if you want to do like I don't know how your Patreon stuff works, but if you want to put the plus extension of this one on your Patreon, like just mirror this up conversation in full over there, that's cool with me. And I would like to mirror yours onto my Patreon feed too. So it's just
I could put I can give you the Patreon MP3, and then if your Patreon is in MP3 form, I could definitely post it to mine.
Yeah, I'll send it to you. We'll do it that way. All right, Aaron, enough talking shop. Let's let these people get back to their life and listen to something else for a while.
Right on.
Hopefully Cosmic Keys. Go check him out. Dan's the man. And thanks so much, man. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, I had fun too. Thanks a lot, Chance.
All right. Here we go. We are at the end of the show. Sort of the end. I mean, I think I'm probably going to go on for a minute. This was a lot of explosive topics. And I mean, we weren't explosive, me and Dan, but these ideas, especially when you start questioning someone's ideology on the left or the right, it gets pretty hairy. So I want to thank Dan for just kind of fearlessly expressing what he thinks. And I love how he's shifted and evolved this year in particular in what he's doing on Cosmic Keys and now as a person. We talked about in the plus extension, his personal story of getting out of Chicago, why he needed to do that, what that was like. Got some, a lot of talk about what rock bottom does for us, not against us, what it does for us. And we could probably all relate to that at some point in our life. But yeah, I hope we didn't offend anybody in the first hour by talking about leftism as being the more kind of the more psycho thing right now in the world, because it's not like everybody in the world that considers himself on the left or liberal or Democrat or you name your party. These are all just titles. They're not who you are. They're not who anyone is. You can act as a Democrat or act as a Republican, but you can't be that. It's a noun. But I denounce all of these titles personally, because all I see is the same bird of tyranny with two wings, and it just flaps them one at a time. Like, okay, now we're going to do tyranny with the flavor of leftism, and now we're going to do tyranny with the flavor of rightism. It's bizarre, but I think that if you're at this point, then you heard enough of the conversation to know we're not trying to throw shade at the regular average person. We're looking at these things as institutional leviathans that are devouring the time, energy, and attention of all these people and funneling it into more and more divisive and controversial topics. Controversy, that's an interesting word to talk about on Interverse. What's a controverse? Contra is against, opposing, and verse is like a song or words. So if you try to play two songs that don't harmonize at the same time, you're going to get controversy. It's going to be dissonance. And that is where this whole political situation is right now. I think we talked enough about that. I'm going to stop on that, but at least about the election side of things, I am going to talk about more of what this big conjunction 2021 year is going to look like post conjunction when we move into this new air-based reality, if you will, and the idea of the Great Reset. I find that really interesting. I'm going to get into the Great Reset in a minute. But first, I want to tell you more about Plus, the extended version of this episode that you can get for a mere $5 per month. I mean, I would rather that you stayed on, but you can just do it for 1 month. If you really just want to hear a few, I'm cool with that. But I need your shekels, people. I don't need them. Everything always works out. There's always enough money, but sometimes there's enough money because people like you threw me some money. So I'd really appreciate it. I think you get something good in return. The second hour was great in this conversation, as usual. Sign up at patreon.com/Interverse to do that. And Dan's got a Patreon too. So if you've got money to throw around, help out Mr. Dan Shukis as well, because his podcast is great. And he's also starving artist archetype. I don't think he's starving. He seems like he's doing great. But we talked about in Plus, on top of the whole story of Dan getting out of Chicago, we discussed big cities and how ugly things are able to get whenever that many people swarm, if you will. We talked about the astrology of 2021 with some, I wouldn't say predictions, but some conjecturing about what may come to pass, or at least the flavor of what will be like. Although I think there's a lot of signs out there to tell us exactly what 2021 and beyond is going to look like, at least on the side of society and the way that technology is moving. Speaking of technology, we talked about terraforming both the earth and our bodies, kind of involuntary terraforming that's going on right now. And what really blew my mind was thinking about and opening up this idea that if the earth is being terraformed, but we're a fractal hologram of the earth and of the entire cosmos, then our bodies have to become terraformed. And terraforming, if that's like a new word for you, it just means like terrain modification. Terra, which is earth, and forming, which is, putting it into a form or a shape. But the thing about nature, about terra, is it's actually kind of formless when you think about it. To go back to this idea of you're not a noun, you're not a status, you're not a name or a description or a title, you're a verb. And that's what nature is too. Nature may appear to have form, but that's a temporary aspect of nature. What is eternal in nature is kind of the change of it. I mean, overall, as a whole, it remains unified and unchanging. And that's what you call God, the unchanging God. But on the microcosm level, if you look at any one little piece of the fractal, it's constantly changing. But what forces are bringing about those changes, and how much does human artifice come into play there? And like I was getting into there, if we are terraforming the earth itself or radically changing our bodies in this transhuman way, There's fractal repercussions, and I don't know what we're going to be experiencing because of all this stuff. I mean, you just can't throw a spanner in the works of a perfectly balanced system like nature and expect you're going to be okay because it's your nature. If we don't know what we're doing. I don't want to like make people scared of transhumanism. What's happening is what's happening. We got to learn to live with it. But I think we did a great job of explaining how the age of Aquarius has two different flavors of freedom: freedom from responsibility or total freedom through 100% personal responsibility, which is great. And also, we talked about so much more in the plus extension. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but Dan talked about using magic to open the road opening magic, which is kind of cool, to go from rock bottom, which is what we were talking about, to new opportunities. I think the roads are going to open either way, whether or not you do ceremonial magic. But the best thing that you can do with magic, which is just another form of art or language, is to change your mind about something, change how you feel about something. That's all you can really do. That's like a healthy form of what you call magic. Not to influence other people, but yourself, to just like draw your heart and mind closer towards your spirit's true intention and, go without fear. So there was so much more. And plus, he went 15 minutes extra with me. We did that accidentally. So enjoy that little bonus 15 minutes. And I want to talk about the Great Reset a little more. I want to do something a little different to try to make sense of the Great Reset. It is a phrase being bandied about by the financial elite and like the types of super banker, weird James Bond villain guys that are seemingly all ready to go with big plans for how to deal with this COVID thing, as if it was already prepared. And now they set the table and now they're serving us dinner. Nasty GMO dinner. But I'm going to do something a little different and play a clip from another show here in the outro. Don't do that very often, but I think this just is so good to let it speak for itself. I pulled this out of from CorbettReport.com, but it's actually an interview that James Corbett was being interviewed on Del Bigtree's The High Wire. Del Bigtree is an interesting cat. He started out pretty vanilla, but over the years, he's getting more and more radicalized in a good way. His whole thing was Vaxxed, and a documentary where he's just been like pounding the pavement and making so much content to just keep questioning and keep pointing out the flaws in this entire vaccine idea, and to just like let people make their own decision about it. He doesn't even say don't get them. He's just like, make your own decision, but you need to know what's up. So anyway, Del's a cool guy. He got kicked off of YouTube recently by the censors, and he had a huge channel. Ridiculous, of course. Martyr for the cause, if you will. I'm still hanging in there on YouTube somehow. And speaking of YouTube, when I play this clip, if you happen to be watching the video version of the show that's on YouTube or Facebook video, BitChute and brand NewTube, those are kind of the only places I'm putting up the videos right now. And Patreon, if you're a Plus member, you get a video version of the whole 2+ hour show. So that's neat. And yeah, that being said, if you are watching the video or you want to go hop onto it, you'll see my face. I actually put myself out there in videos now. I've been doing it for a while. Just want to remind you, if you like that, I get that the content's audio based and that's how I listen to most things, but I make some cool art to go with the videos. Check it out if you want. So I'm going to play this clip, and the video version of the show will actually see the clip, which is neato. I'm going to play this clip. It's going to be a couple minutes. Corbett and Del talking about this Great Reset thing. And to introduce the clip, they are discussing a guy named Klaus Schwab. Klaus? Anyway, Klaus Schwab. He's an economic theoretician or some kind of black magician, sorcerer. He wears really weird, creepy secret society robes. There's pictures of him out there doing that. But he wrote a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. Conveniently, this whole book was just like wrapped up and done and delivered to the world midway through the year. We hadn't even been in this COVID fantasy land very long. That goes back to my point that, maybe somebody knew something about what was about to happen. I don't know. But anyway, Klaus is the guy that's proponent of this Great Reset. The Great Reset is the idea that we need to like restructure the entire economy of every country and make it all part of one larger system that has top-down control from, I don't know who yet is supposed to be the one in control. I guess the bank. I don't know. I can't say that I'm like perfectly knowledgeable about all this. I just want you to know this is a real thing. The Great Reset idea, it's aligning with the sky clock, the Great Conjunction, the Aquarian age, whatever. These big shifts that are happening, epochal shifts that we're experiencing right now on Earth. There are always going to be powerful authority figures ready to take advantage of any good crisis and maybe even set it up for themselves. If you got billions and trillions of dollars, it's beyond our imagining what someone could do with that and how that could manipulate the levers and gears of the social structure of this here spaceship Earth. Not really a spaceship, just a phrase. Dojo Earth. That's what James True calls it. I like that. But holy crap, I'm really going on. I think I explained the Great Reset enough. Just look into it for yourself. It's wild stuff. To think that with or without the consent of the government is going to be doing a whole lot of bigger, better, newer, stronger, tighter governing on everything. So here we go. Here's the clip with Corbett and Dell. And guys, Corbett is the man. You should be, if you want like real news, follow the Corbett Report. Really good stuff. Such good journalism. I mean, I feel like I could get my mom to watch Corbett Report and actually be like, yeah, I understand this guy's putting it all together well, but if I could actually get her to watch the video. No offense, Mom, if you're listening. I just use you as an example. Lots of people I can't get to watch things or listen to things that they maybe should know. There's a lot of distractions. Okay, switching over to this clip.
He says, the spread of infectious diseases has a unique ability to fuel fear, anxiety, and mass hysteria. In so doing, as we have seen, it also challenges our social cohesion and collective capacity to manage a crisis. Epidemics are by nature divisive and traumatizing. And if you go on in that passage, he talks about families, friends, and neighbors being pitted against each other and looking for some sort of solution. Well, don't worry, the World Economic Forum and their cronies have the solution for you, and they're calling it the Great Reset. I think that the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab in particular, are positioning themselves to be the central organizing body for this group of concepts that are being sold to the public under this Great Reset title. But that doesn't mean, I think, that they are pulling all the strings. This isn't the sort of conspiracy that people like to deride when they talk about conspiracy theories of a bunch of men in a smoky, shadowy room making secretive plans. I think this is out in the open, and it's because the convergence of a lot of different people who hold the same ideology essentially are agreeing on the main aspects of the way to better consolidate global control over the economy and thus the people of the world. And again, I think this COVID-19 crisis is just the perfect cover for that.
There's a video that I've seen from the World Economic Forum of Klaus Schwab. Let's play that really quickly and take a look at this.
It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased global cooperation, and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era. We have a choice to remain passive, which would lead to the amplification of many of the trends we see today. Polarization, nationalism, racism, and ultimately increased social unrest and conflicts. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract, particularly integrating the next generation. We can change our behavior to be in harmony with nature again. And we can make sure that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution are best utilized to provide us with better lives. In short, we need a great reset.
I mean, that guy, when you see a video like that, it really is like a character out of James Bond, as I know you've referenced. I mean,
Right? Isn't it like a character out of James Bond? If you're interested in more of that, their conversation was awesome. So find that on the Highwire or on Corbett Report. But I wanted to play that because a lot of the stuff he's saying there, if you don't know how to decipher it, you're like, oh, I mean, I guess that sounds good. There are all these negative trends that the world has been going through. And that if we don't do something now while we have the opportunity because everything's shut down, those trends could get worse. And, we need to protect Mother Nature and all that. Well, let me tell you that those guys, like this Klaus Schwab guy, he has nothing to do with protecting Mother Nature. In fact, when he says we have a choice between more racism, more blah, 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 all negative, bad things, we have a choice between that or a great reset. I'm telling you, that's a veiled threat. It's not even very veiled. It's not that he's saying that we're going to inevitably have those problems. What he's saying is, me and my people will make sure that those problems continue if you don't forge a new social contract. The devil only works through contract. Let me tell you that. That's the only way it exists. That's the only way Satan exists, getting you to contract. Just think about that word. You're contracting. And I think we should be expanding. And, the environmental side, this goes back to the whole thing about how a lot of people that identify with the left have really good intentions, and they're not like the psychos that I was talking about that I run into online that freak out about crazy stuff and project their own vitriol at what they don't like about themselves onto others. Obviously, people on the right do that too. Just to be fair, just don't be a polarized individual and you'll be better off. But one of the good intentions behind people in the left, and by the way, people on the right too, even though leftists don't want to believe it, people on both sides, actually regular people want the world to not be fucking annihilated by pollution and all the stuff that humans are currently doing. Actually, nobody wants that deep down. I mean, maybe some greedy people, a small percentage are like, fuck it. But I know plenty of people, Republican or Democrat, that don't think that we should be continually polluting the world. Are they doing a lot about it in their daily life? Who really is? Not many of us are, regardless of what side of the political wrestling match aisle that we might decide that we stand on. And so when a guy like Klaus tells us that we got to get in harmony with Mother Nature, let me tell you what, he would have done very different things up to this point, and people like him, if that was actually the goal. And because this is the World Economic Forum we're talking about, they're a big part of this entire debt, slavery, fiat currency system that's around the world, this extremely ridiculous super Saturnian satanic system. And why I call it that is because Satan's not a real guy. Just let me get that out there. The idea of Satan is anything adversarial to nature or the universe. God is the totality of all reality and self-existence. Satan is the opposite of that, anti-reality, non-existence. So what is debt-based money? Our money system, every dollar that's printed, there is debt attached to it. There's never enough money created to ever pay off all the money that's owed in the system. So we have musical chairs where there's never enough for everyone to have a place to sit at the table, and there's guaranteed poverty. And you exacerbate that by things like compounding interest, where if you've got millions of dollars and you just leave it in the bank, you'll make millions of dollars off of it over time. Just free money forever, perpetually. And then on the other hand, the people that have no money, they get loans at interest, which is usury, which is where you needed $50, you didn't have it. So you're going to pay someone $75 to get $50. And we're all doing this all the time because, well, it's easy. I'll make that money later. And I just need this house now. I just need this car now. I'm in a house with a mortgage right now. I am. But this debt-based paradigm is an obvious anti-nature thing, because if there's always a growing debt, and then productivity is constantly motivated by the need to pay off your debts, which means we will produce crap to sell that has no value, and we'll just continually In an infinite growth paradigm, because the debt, same thing. The debt paradigm is infinite. That means that the economic paradigm of growth is also attempting to be infinite in a finite place, meaning that there's always more debt and you always need to make more money, which means you always need to produce more stuff. And it's an exponentially increasing curve. But the place where we're going to get all these resources from nature, it is what it is. It takes time to replenish itself. And we don't have time to play around like this much longer. So all that is just to explain that if guys like Klaus at the World Economic Forum actually gave two shits about saving the earth, they would completely eradicate any kind of notion of debt-based fiat currency, which by its nature is adversarial to nature. I hope that all makes sense. I've been kind of on a long ramble here, but this is contraction. This is what we're seeing is the social contraction, tightening up. We may all be tightening our belts in a sense lately. I have been, but that's just because I've lost a little bit of weight, getting myself back in shape. Hooray. Because that's your real wealth, is your health, as we discussed with Tom Barnett last week. But I want to do the opposite of this idea of contraction. I'm going to play us out with a song by LS Dream called Expand the Universe, which I think is a pretty dope track. I caught one of his live streams and it was real wild and psychedelic. You can follow LS Dream on YouTube. And I think Twitch to see that stuff. If you've been missing live music, there's a lot of good artists out there doing streams with crazy artistic visuals. And yeah, so it's out there, but I hope you guys have a great grand conjunction coming up in less than a month, man. It's kind of crazy. And I guess if this is the 5D ascension, when we cross that threshold, I'll see y'all in another dimension. But I have a feeling we're all going to be right here when we cross that threshold. But maybe we'll be able to start seeing the world with new eyes and seeing ourselves with a fresh perspective as well, as we get our heads out from underwater and back up into the air, moving from Piscean age to the age of Aquarius. And if we haven't already done that, I mean, I don't see these thresholds as hard and fast. I think they're a spectrum that we're constantly moving through. So I love talking to Dan. Love that you guys stuck around to the end and listened to me jibber jabber all this time. I hope you give Cosmic Keys a follow on whatever podcast player that you like. And I hope you sign up for Patreon, for Interverse. That'd be so cool. I'd love that. If you're on the fence, just think like, if you're telling yourself, I'll do it later and I'll catch up on these episodes later. Wouldn't it be a pain in the ass if you went ahead and got Plus a month from now and then you were going back to episodes you already listened to and you start at the halfway point where the music break is and you're like, what were they talking about? They're just jumping right back into it. Now I got to re-listen to the whole thing. Maybe that's okay. Maybe it was so good that you want to listen to the whole thing again. Sometimes people tell me that they've heard the episodes multiple times. The record was the Clint Richardson episode. A friend told me they listened to that like 5 times already, which is pretty amazing. Good news. Clint's coming back real soon. And I've been learning a lot from him. And if you've been learning a lot from him, then you've seen what I've been learning from him, because some of my rhetoric has evolved to hopefully be more accurate to the real and true definitions of words as best as I can. But man, I'm still going 25 minutes deep on this outro. Not good. Need to be more concise. Or maybe you like it. I don't know. But you guys have a great grand conjunction. Have a great December as we're heading into it. Have a great existence. Have a great reality. Have a lot of love for yourself and others. And, just keep working on it. Sifting through what is and isn't healthy about our attachments and about our beliefs and behaviors. And we're all doing the thing. And I'm proud of you all. And I'm even proud of me. And LS Dream is this music I'm about to play. Expand the Universe. Hope you like it. Peace out.
Cellular.